Katie and I am your nerd for today. In keeping with this month's educational theme, I'm going to teach you a little bit about knitting. But Katie, I hear you say, there are already thousands of knitting tutorial videos out there. Why would I watch yours instead of one with good lighting? And that's an excellent question. The answer is that this one includes a history lesson.
So if you're going to knit, there are two things that you need. You need knitting needles, at least two, and you're also going to need some yarn. This is some scrap yarn I had around, so it looks a bit messy, but it'll still do the trick. So the first thing you need to do is cast on. There are a lot of different ways to do this, but I'll show you one of the basic ones. The first step is just to tie a knot. That easy. Then you slip your needle into the knot and pull it tight. Now you're going to want to leave a tail on the end of it, at least a little bit. Depending on what you're knitting, you're going to need to weave it back into your knitting at the end so that you can't see it. But if you're knitting a larger project with different pieces, like say a sweater, you want to leave a longer tail so you can use that to sew them together. Now you're going to want to take your needle in your right hand and your string in your left hand, wrap it around your thumb and your finger, and slide your needle into the loop. Then pull it tight. Do that again, and you're creating stitches on your needle. You just keep on doing that until you have as many stitches as you need for your project. So, knitting history. The oldest knitted artifact is a pair of socks that were found in Egypt, dating back to about 1100 AD. Knitting was probably around before that, however, because the socks that were found were quite complicated. They had a lot of color work and different patterns and stuff going on in them. Okay, back to the knitting lesson. So there are two basic stitches in knitting. There's the knit and the purl. We're going to start with the knit. So now you want to hold your needle in your left hand and put your yarn to the back of the work. Hold it where the camera can see it. Move your needle through the stitch, the front of the stitch, from left to right, behind the other needle. Take your yarn in your other hand, wrap it around the needle, there we go. And then you're going to slide your needle from the back to the front and slide it off. There you go, you've just knit one stitch. Same thing, from left to right, behind the needle, wrap your yarn around, slide it from the back to the front, and then slip the stitch off the needle. So you just keep doing that until you've knit a whole row. So knitting didn't come over to Europe till another century or two after those socks were found in Egypt, or the time those socks date from. And it was originally brought to Europe by Muslim knitters who were hired by wealthy families in Spain who hired them to knit things. And eventually knitting was learned by Europeans themselves, and it became actually extremely fashionable. People were knitting very fancy items and delicate items, and it was very much in style at that point. And around the 1400s, the 15th century, there were actually quite a few professional knitting guilds. Knitting was actually a male profession at the time because... So the other knitting stitch is the purl, and this one you slip your needle from right to left instead of left to right, and then the same thing. You wrap your needle, in camera, there we go, wrap your yarn around the needle, and then you slide your needle. This time it goes from the front to the back, and then you slip the stitch off, same as before. Your yarn wants to be at the front of the work for this, so right to left, and then front to back, and slip it off. And again, just keep doing that until you get the whole row. So as I was saying, knitting was a male-dominated profession at this time. It was a trade, something that people were skilled at and made quite a bit of money from. But then with the Industrial Revolution, there were much faster and more efficient and cheaper ways of making fabrics. And those sort of took over from the traditional hand-knit items, and so knitting fell out of style and stopped being a respected profession and became something that was more of a folk craft and a hobby and not proper work for men, and that's when it became a women's leisure activity. And you ever notice how things that you can make a living from are men's activities and things that you just do for fun are women's activities? Or maybe it's that things that men do are worth money and things that women do aren't. Anyway, the point of all this is that knitting is super rad and everyone should do it regardless of gender roles. So here's our completed work. Fun fact is that the backside of a knit stitch looks like a purl and the backside of a purl stitch looks like a knit. So as you can see here, all the knit sides are lined up. They look like vertical rows, and then on the reverse we have all the purl stitches, which are horizontal rows. And that is the basics of how you knit. Thanks for watching.